I'm the executive director of Texas Tech Costa Rica.
There you go, eso. Entonces, si van a escuchar, vamos a subtitular partes. AI también puede hacer la vara como inglés en español. Y bueno, no es el primer podcast en inglés y en español que hemos tenido. Tuvimos, one time we had the Prince of Serbia.
Oh my God. Well, I'm not nearly as cool as the Prince of Serbia, but...
It was a joke. He's the... So there's a crown in Serbia, but it's not really there because they took out the monarchy. But he's the... If the crown was reinstituted, but currently he's working in crypto. So that's why I talked to him.
That makes him extra cool.
Really weird stuff. But so lo hemos hecho antes y lo vamos a hacer otra vez. Entonces vamos con eso. Justamente hoy estaba en como una pequeña conferencia y estaban hablando de educación en Costa Rica. Y uno de los principales problemas que están muchos de los políticos, que bueno, estamos entrando en ciclo electoral, y lo que están hablando es que a pesar de que tenemos un gran interés de empresas que quieren venir a Costa Rica o ya están en Costa Rica y están ofreciendo trabajos, que la mano de obra calificada para poder llegar a esa demanda de trabajos actualmente no existe porque tenemos un déficit educativo y de ciertas carreras, ¿verdad? Que son como las más prominentes en estos espacios. Entonces quisiera tal vez hablar un poquito de cómo ves vos esta foto educativa a Costa Rica, porque mucho podemos hablar de que la pandemia hizo esto y las huelgas, bueno, eso fue hace años, pero ¿qué es la realidad actual y cuáles son las consecuencias de esa realidad?
Okay. That is a packed question.
Yeah.
And so first of all, I always like to say that I'm not your average gringa who, you know, sort of backpacked in here and stayed. I've been here for 25 years and I've worked in education. I came here as a Fulbrighter and then doing academic work, and then ended up staying here, deciding to leave New York and make my career here. So when I talk about Costa Rica, none of this should be seen as a criticism. None of this should be seen as this is your problem, not my problem. I consider this very much my issue, and this is Problema País, and I'm definitely trying to look for those solutions and those answers. So that's the caveat before we go into all of this. What I see is that let's start with the happy parts, the bright spots first. And that is that there are some really wonderful examples out there of things working in Costa Rica. And for me, it's a matter of looking at how we can duplicate those efforts and how we can actually draw upon those successes. For instance, the Colegios Técnicos Profesionales. There are some that are so excellent, like COAU, and are doing such a good job preparing students and know how it's done. So it's not as if the entire system is broken and we have to just, you know, take away the drawing, crumple it up and throw it away in the trash. Also the Colegios Científicos, which we hear a lot about. They're doing an incredible job and probably have some of the greatest talent, the IB schools. Now, so we have a lot out there in the public system that I think is a blueprint for what can work. Now, our challenge is how do we get those things that are working and we can take them outside of the greater metropolitan area, outside of the GAM, and that we increase access so that, for instance, and I'm not picking on art careers at all, I'm not picking on those things, but let's say that at CETEPES, that we're not teaching more graphic arts classes. We're not hiring more graphic arts teachers. And there is a value, of course, in doing that. Now with AI, maybe that value is changing, but there are things that we need to do, and we need to maybe change the offering so that we can create people who are, I would say, future-proof. They have the ability to be able to work in the careers that are already there and that are already available. And so, like, I would say that's the moral of the story. Let's work and take what we have and see how we can spread it and how it can be proliferated throughout the country.
Right. Yeah. I think that when you look at art careers are funny because I went to an art school. So
yeah, sorry.
No, it's valid. It's valid.
It is what it is.
I think that specifically with art careers, I think there's and this is a critique I have. I mean, my school was decent at it, but I think at large is when you forget that you have to kind of be like an entrepreneur if you want to be an artist. You need to go through basic business and accounting, and if you're going to sell a painting or make a film, I mean, like the first time you make a short film with any budget, even $100 or $5,000 or $1, you're gonna need to budget out. Okay, well, how much is for camera gear? How much is for insurance? And so my school was decent at it, not the best, but I think that a lot of the times those things are forgotten, and we hire a lot of like ex-art school or art school graduates because of what we do.
Of course.
And what we see is a lot of that. Like there's a lot of like the system puts them through a career that, I mean, in the best case scenario has a practical use for their job, but a lot of the times gets spent in the like more esoteric kind of like, which is good. It teaches you to think, but if they forget to tell you, like you say, future proof, what is your job actually going to be? That's my university. Pratt was very focused on, okay, what's placement, post-career placement, right, of like where are you gonna go and what are you gonna do, and all of our teachers worked. But yeah, so I think in general, when we look at the career field, and obviously with STEM careers and STEAM careers being like the major ones, where do you think, like, as you're getting all these graduates, and I know Texas Tech, the campus here is still kind of small, but like you guys are getting more and more people in, where are you seeing that, like, where is the bar going, and what kind of students do we need to create more of, and what do we have currently?
Well, I think that and part of the traditional educational system, it teaches rote thinking, memorization, regurgitation. You just spit out what you learn. Mm-hmm. I mean, critical thinking will never go out of style. You have got to be a critical thinker. You mentioned STEM education or STEAM education. I mean, kids need to now know basics of programming. We all need to work with AI. We need to know basics of accounting. We need, just like exactly what you said, these are things that are fundamental to anyone's success, not even to mention soft skills. And that's taught, and I hate soft skills. It sounds so mushy, but I would more say that they're power skills. It's like, how do you sit down and talk to someone? How do you give a presentation? Teamwork, adversity, all of those things are not being taught. And so they seem so simple. And so I don't think that necessarily that teachers or faculty members in universities are taught how to teach those things or bake that into their formula of what they are teaching in a university level class or a high school class or even with little kids. So those sort of life skills are bedrock, and then these more technical skills everyone must have, including those of us who are much deeper into their careers. Without those, we're all going to be more dinosaurs than we already have. So this is a lifelong learning type of question.
When you look at AI, which is a huge question, right? And today I've had a long day of thinking and being angry at education. So it was funny that we had the podcast because it happened simultaneously, the two conversations. But one thing that I was speaking with Lauren today about was, we're saying, okay, how much is AI actually affecting the way that students are coming up? Because a report just came out that U.S. schools are having serious difficulties with math and reading, and reading comprehension specifically, right? Because you feed ChatGPT or whatever essay, and you're like, hey, maybe explain this to me in 1 or 2 paragraphs. Now you don't have to read it and explain it to yourself in 1 or 2 paragraphs. But how much is that actually affecting, do you think, students' performance, or have you even began to see that? And when you look at the way teaching is done, I suppose there has to be like a complete change in terms of like, no longer is it just write an essay. It's like, I don't know, maybe do an oral presentation, or it has to kind of change, no?
Yeah, for sure. Super valid point. And you had a long day. I've also had already a long day, and it's just about noon. I gave a talk this morning about AI in education to high schoolers in the San Jose area. And it was unbelievable. I asked them, what is AI? What does AI do? Nobody could even answer. They didn't understand what they were even using. Some of them said, I don't use AI. I said, of course you use AI. Every single day you use AI. We all do. That's even just a regular Google search. Yeah. So in terms of, will this really revolutionize the student and teaching? Absolutely, and it already is. So I asked today, and I asked our audience here, what does being smart even mean anymore? So is it the person that knows how to prompt the best? Do I create the best prompt so that I can get Claude or Grok or, Perplexity or Chatty, as I like to call her, to give me the best response? Does that mean I'm smart? So I get the essay that's been spit out. Where's the authenticity? You also wonder, so what will true wealth or what will true value look like, a few years from now? It's the difference between the lab grown diamond or the mined diamond. So if I have a poem that I, Ellen, have written, is that somehow more valuable, even if maybe it's not as good as the poem that ChatGPT has written? So those are the types of questions I think that are really just what we're starting to grapple with. And in a classroom, and I actually taught during the summer session at Texas Tech, I supervised a class, taught an internship class, and it was unbelievable. Students turned in things to me that were fully produced by AI and thought that was fine. And it was a report about their internship experience. How can ChatGPT tell me about their internship experience? So even when you think that, it seems obvious that you better write something, I think it's not so obvious anymore. And so that gets to, how do we evaluate students? So like you said, should it all be, an oral presentation? Should I have you write an essay in class if I want to make sure that Pietro is actually doing this? And is there really a problem if you are getting help? So these are all questions that swirl around in my mind and that I'm constantly thinking about. And I challenged these students with whom I was speaking today, blank stares. No one's thinking about these questions, which I think scares me more.
I remember in college I had I got obsessed with philosophy because I had a really good professor. And so he tried to do like a very Socratian, kind of like conversational. And one of the first things that we noticed, me and my buddy were like really into this class and into this professor. And one of the first things we noticed is the system was really cool, but it was kind of pricing the students that were willing to interact and the more shy students. So it was a very, I remember one day we had a class at a bar, and we were like drinking and talking about existential philosophy with this like.
Sounds very Pratt.
Sí, super.
Yeah, I went to Columbia. It sounds very Columbia. It could be anywhere in the city, anywhere in San Francisco, anywhere in Boston, whatever.
And our professor was like a Carnegie Mellon graduate with like a big beard, and then like he wore like the 1940s get up. It's like the whole scene, oh, Captain, my captain, and so but then my buddy and I were talking about like, oh, like it's really cool, but it does suck that like if you're a more shy person, then it's very difficult because there are people who I had classmates in school who thrived at the memorization, quiz. I have 17 markers for my 17 different things and binders, and I would turn in my homework like grabbing a piece of paper and uncrumpling it and being like, here it is, I'm sorry it's late. So it must be difficult as you analyze all because there has to be kind of a standardized system if you want to kind of like filter people, of course, like, and it was something that I grappled with because I didn't fit the traditional system. But I wonder now how universities are kind of looking at that, how you guys are like looking at this wider sea of things, and especially in a country like Costa Rica, which is facing kind of like a deficit in these areas.
Yeah, I do think that different systems are good for different people. So, that total introvert who's the memorizer, that person in the Chinese education system or in the Korean education system, that person's going to excel. You and I are not. We're not going to do well in that. So again, there's not a one size fits all. And I do think that the current education system, the public education system, again, it's anything that's massified does not allow for that individuality. Enter AI, and I do think that with AI in the classroom, it does allow for more personalized teaching and opportunities of that kind. And one way is that teachers, if they can use AI as a tool and they have materials that are created or that are dynamic, then they have more time to spend with students and be able to see, because AI is adapting to the students' needs. So I do think that there is real application done well. I really do. And it's a real opportunity, again, for those different types of learning personalities, as you well describe.
How do we begin to get more people into those careers that have those job opportunities, but that we're not meeting perfectly yet?
I think one thing is that guidance counselors, principals, teachers, parents have to be more aware and have to be able to have that information at the ready and be able to answer questions, shape, and help students understand. Because right now, I think many of us in education are woefully underprepared to be able to help guide students. I also think that many students go through, even through in these CTPs, they go through and they have all these career options, and then you have lots of openings, let's say in data analytics. And there are definitely tracks within the CTPs that would lead you there, and maybe you're even good at those things. But if you don't know that they're job opportunities, and if you don't know that 1 + 1 = 2, you're never going to get there. And so I do think that guidance is really part of it, and that is something that I'm not sure that any of the educational systems are necessarily doing in such a great way right now where we are.
Right, that makes sense. I think there's a statistic that says like the higher, even if you have one person in your family that was placed in a high earning job, you're probably, and it can be like extended family, it can be a cousin or an uncle, the higher likelihood you have of like becoming a high earner throughout your life. I think it's kind of like the same thing. If you don't know the opportunity even exists in your own sphere, and with very little examples, right, it's way less likely that these students will say, oh, I can be a data analytic, processor or something.
Completely. And then add that, let's get to one of my favorite topics, girls in STEM. So
Right.
let's say that you don't have that model, that you could be good at math, or you could do something in a STEM field. You're never even going to necessarily look at that. You might look at more traditionally female careers, and I might get a lot of hate mail about that, but it's those are the stats in Costa Rica. And there are also a lot of studies that say if you're a girl and you have a mom that worked, you will probably be a higher earner and be more professional in your career because you had that modeling. And if you don't have that, then it's harder for you as a girl to maybe necessarily strive and shoot for something that you might not be aware exists. And the same thing with boys, I would argue. It cuts both ways.
Of course, no, but in Costa Rica today, we're looking at some statistics that we have this structural issue where, so not only do we have this deficit in terms of like job placements and then people that can qualify to those jobs, so the pool is already small, but then you have to cut that pool in half because most women are at home taking care of either kids because we don't have like a correct way to La Red de Cuido has been dismantled and abandoned, and now because our population is getting very old, they're taking care of grandparents and parents. So because we do live in this patriarchal, Pietro de Construido, but it's true, patriarchal society, women fall into that job, and we have a very small qualified labor pool, which is reduced literally in half because then these women are forced to take on this caretaker role for both parents and kids. So that point is incredibly important. I mean, it seems like it was hammered on for the past 10 years. 2010 to 2020, it was very like woke minded to speak
Totally.
on up, and I know we're like the pendulum's gone the other way. But I do think it's, at least in countries like Costa Rica, it isn't talked about enough or pushed on enough to make sure that it is, because it literally will break the economy if we don't get women into STEM fields.
It's bad business. That's what I explain to people. You don't have to think about equality. Like you don't have to be a feminist to think that women should work. Women should work because it builds the economy, exactly what you're saying, and it fuels our ability to fulfill the demands that we have already out there from all of these employers who, if we don't have the right human capital here, you have major companies that will need to look elsewhere because they have too many vacancies. And with the immigration laws here, it's not so easy to import talent. There are other countries that have imported talent from all over Asia, for example. We don't do that here. We don't think that's okay as a country, from a political standpoint. And so, again, you have frustrated employers. And I sit on AmCham's board too. And one thing that we think about all the time is, wow, where are we going to find the qualified labor force? And that's the biggest concern for employers here. And again, that will affect our economy if people cannot find the qualified workers that they need.
It's interesting. I'll transition into students who might be able to come here. We were just talking about that before we started recording, and I'll share the story, which is interesting. So I think, well, of course, we all know immigration law in the U.S. is changing dramatically all the time and very quickly. And I have a lot of friends. I have one friend whose son is attending college in the U.S. So he was just going to the U.S. This summer. I think he was connecting from the U.S. to going somewhere else. And so they started questioning him to why was he transitioning, from the U.S. to somewhere else. And he was like, "Oh, I'm on summer break, whatever." He said the wrong thing. They checked his what was it called?
Student visa?
Yeah, but not the student visa, the I-20.
I-20.
They checked his I-20. It turns out the college had mishandled his I-20.
I know this story.
And so he got detained, put in handcuffs, taken to a detention center. Like an completely insane for someone that was fully
got out of hand in a matter of minutes.
And for someone that was legal, it was just a paper mishap.
And he was transiting
through
to go to, from what I understand, not Europe, but somewhere.
He was going somewhere.
I think UK.
And so I think that with that story, there's tons more on top of like the pauses that have gone on in terms of like giving out new student visas. So when we have a U.S. college campus in Costa Rica, which of course they're very good university in Costa Rica at large.
Great universities, powerhouses.
It's interesting to think about like, okay, maybe people will look into, hey, I can't go to the U.S., but I can still, let's say if you're interested in a U.S. degree, you can come to Texas Tech, or you're interested in a UCR degree or whatever degree, a tech degree. How likely or how easy is that for a student from Colombia to say, hey, I want to get a university degree in Costa Rica?
Whether it's Texas Tech or it's El Tecnológico, it's not the easiest thing because the system is not set up to easily be able to take students through the student visa process. The country has not really thought about that in terms of maybe a market that it could serve. And I have long argued that Costa Rica, just because of our sheer location, just like we attracted all these multinationals and became a hub in the Americas for incredible business, we could be the same thing for education in terms of university education and study abroad. We attract lots of study abroad students, but people come without visas here always for study abroad. It shouldn't be that way. I mean, there are ways to fix the system that Migración, if you're listening, I mean, these are things that we can do that would not be that hard, and they're not being done right now. So those are real barriers to entry in terms of students coming here. Look, we figured it out, we do it, but you can be without a student visa and just be in trámite for 6, 8, 10, 12 months.
Wow. I mean, that's crazy considering that, like, yes, if you're looking at what's happening in the U.S. and, the university pool in Latin America is good and bad and it has everything in between. But you're saying, yeah, maybe I want an experience somewhere else. Like and I think that's very enriching, whether it's Costa Rica or anywhere else. I think leaving your home country to go experience new cultures and new people.
You and I both did it.
I think it's amazing. If you have the opportunity to do that. So it's like, why would it be so difficult for someone to come here if they're willing to come in and, put money into institutions and the economy and, and also enrich the cultural, diversity of the country by people come with ideas and people come with capital and maybe they'll stay and work in one of these companies that we so desperately need them to work in.
Yeah, I mean, not to sound like a commercial for Texas Tech Costa Rica, but our campus is 40% international. Wow. Which is super exciting. I mean, we have students from Russia, from South Africa, has students from Romania, from China. So there is a need here. And here's another interesting statistic that I just read on the BBC, I think, either last night or this morning. It all blends together. And that is that Germany is now the #1 destination for Indian students. Can you think of two cultures more different?
Right.
The Indian culture and the German culture, but it used to be the United States, and overnight it flipped. And so why could we not be reading stories in a couple of years that Costa Rica could become the #1 destination for X country to be able to study? And here, you can go to UCI Med and you can get an incredible degree in medicine. You can go to La UCR and you can study chemical engineering or philosophy. You can come to us and you can study computer science or restaurant, hotel, and institutional management. Like, it spans the gamut in high quality education here. But again, we need to make some reforms to the system for us to be able to live that dream. And there are other international institutions that knock on our door and would like to lay roots here and would like to open up. So I think that if the government is listening at all to any of this, it's like, this is a great opportunity.
What is so the post education system, like between universities in Costa Rica, the ecosystem, how is it divided right now? We have some, because all I see, I mean, I'm not applying to university, and I never will again, I don't think. A postgrad's always like tempting, but it just seems like such a, I don't know, like such an adventure that like I would have to be almost retired to go back into.
Well, I finished my doctorate, last year, so it's never too late.
Right.
So think of me. Think of me.
So what does that ecosystem look like right now? We have, the big national institutions.
You have 5 of those, all super high quality and, their own way, specializing in their powerhouses in very different areas. But they're also suffering from funding issues right now. And then you have the private system, which is really far-ranging. You have really top universities there, a few of us. I'll put myself up there. And then you have sort of mid-range, and then you have some that are not, I don't think, doing what they should be doing. And you have a system that oversees them that, that needs some work as well. So in many countries, there is one system that oversees all education or oversees all higher education. Here, it's separated by public and private. And it may behoove us to look at one system that could oversee all, graduate education.
Right. That's interesting that it would be separate and treated under like a different doctrine.
But completely different. And I don't think it necessarily serves the people
right.
well to have that. They're different standards. Sorry.
Yeah, because I mean, I understand that there's like a certain level of scrutiny in terms of like budgeting, and there's very controversial how much people make in the
right.
public sector, and sure, and we can that's a conversation in and of itself. But the regulatory guidelines as to what makes a good degree or a bad degree, or what makes I think the U.S. is there's like, what was it called? It was like you're like certified or not certified or
accredited.
Accredited. That's
right.
the one. That's the word. Yeah, you can be accredited or unaccredited, and,
right.
and then you knew, right? You knew
and
that if you're
going.
going.
The bottom feeders are the unaccredited universities.
Right.
But everyone's subject, whether you're the University of Michigan, which is public, or Berkeley, which is public, or whether you're private, you're Harvard or you're Stanford, you're
right.
all under the same accreditation system. Here, it's completely different. And as I said, I don't think it necessarily serves us well as a country to have parallel systems with very different standards.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Interesting, right?
I didn't know that.
It's something we don't think about enough. In my opinion.
Yeah, because when I remember, like when I was looking at art schools, and that was a thing that like, because with art specifically difficult because there's not like I guess there's RISD and Pratt, and there's a few programs in UCLA and stuff that you can look at and be like, oh, NYU Tisch, UCLA, whatever. But outside of that, it becomes very muddied as to like what's a good art school, what's a bad, So I remember. And it was that I was looking at like, oh, so this is accredited, this is unaccredited. And it really helps you like at least filter out what you think is like, oh, people might not take my degree as seriously because they cost us much money and they look right. just as enticing on the internet. And the video and the campuses look nice, but you don't know that when someone's who knows, has been through the system, looks at your CV, which is what you want, what they're going to look at. I was just talking to, so we're doing this report on education, and Carol comes to me and she's like, hey, the report came out. What do we talk about? I'm like, well, I'm not so interested in the report itself because everyone's going to talk about
right.
that. I want to talk about what the consequences of this means. And so she told me and this is not a plug, but this happened. It's like ask businessmen that you know when they look at a CV of a Costa Rican private university who they're looking at. And so just two names came out. They said INCAE for master's programs and above, and Texas Tech. They said, one of them said, well, I think they're very new, but I would consider Texas Tech. And that was it. It was INCAE and Texas Tech.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to hear that, needless to say.
But it's interesting, right? It's interesting how even for like a guy that I literally just WhatsApped a few people. Like, hey, if you're looking at CVs, like, what are you looking at? And they said, well, Públicas first. Totally. And then they said a Masters in CAE and Texas Tech, which is new. I don't know much about them, but I know Texas Tech in the US, and it should be just as good here. But not having that board certified kind of like standard, I think probably is for employers like AmCham or Intel or whatever, might be even difficult for them to like know what's good and what's bad.
Yeah, I mean, and the rankings where there's some private institutions here, they say, I ranked in QS, this quarterly, whatever. Wow, it's so, those are not reliable rankings, especially not here. The things that are being considered, those don't even make sense. And so I take those with a real grain of salt. But what I can say, and what's interesting, I guess, again, not to seem like a tireless self-promoter, but is that in the United States, we're actually a public institution. And so we have the ethos of a public institution. So we consider ourselves our peers. And it's really interesting. We love to do things with the public institutions here. We like to collaborate, and we have professors from INCAE. We also have, a good relationship with Earth, and we have a good relationship with UPeace. And, we consider those more of our peers than perhaps some of our private institutions. So,
can you explain a little bit about? So I'm interested in how Texas Tech works here. Because obviously there's the U.S. institution, and then there's the campus here. Right. So how does that work? Is it the same degree? Do you go there? Do you come here? Like if I'm a high school student and I'm going first year into Texas Tech Costa Rica, what does that journey look like? And this is not a paid ad. I'm genuinely curious.
Okay. So first of all of the admissions are done on the main campus. We don't touch them. We recruit students here, but you apply, and you apply through the portal that goes to the main campus. So we don't evaluate anything. And once you're accepted, you're a Texas Tech student. Now, you choose your campus. So do I want to study on the campus in Lubbock, which is the main campus? Do I want to study in Costa Rica? Or do I want to study, they have several other campuses in Texas as well. And so you're basically choosing the campus, and then, you're accepted, let's say, to Texas Tech Costa Rica. But at any time, after one semester, after 1 year, after 3 years, you want to go to the main campus, you don't apply to transfer. You simply tell the registrar, could I please change my designation in the system? I would like to study on the main campus and finish my degree there. So it's a real pathway to get to go to the United States and not have to apply again. Now, ojo, everybody, you have that tiny visa issue that you alluded to, and you still have to go through the U.S. visa process if you would like to study there. But the degree is the same. And if Pietro has his degree from Texas Tech, then it says Texas Tech University. It doesn't say Texas Tech Costa Rica.
Interesting.
It's a Texas Tech degree.
Right. So it's, and the careers are obviously like, some of them are here, but not all of them that are there. And
there are over 100 on the main campus. Yeah, so here we have 6.
Yeah. But that makes sense.
We're starting out with 6.
So as a student, it's the same 4 years. It's the same, and you can just go there, come back, do you guys get a lot of people who apply, or have you got any people who applied, let's say, to the men saw the option of Costa Rica and came here?
Yeah, we have visiting students. They come for a semester
or for
a year. And so we also have study abroad students from the main campus. So besides being 40% international, I'm not even counting the students from the main campus who come and spend time here. And our students can do a semester and study abroad, or they can go and finish their degree. You can also, let's say that you want to study architecture, for instance. You can start here and do your core requirements, and then you can go and finish there, and you can do your last 2 years there and finish the degree. So if we don't have, let's say that you're not ready to leave, or you're worried about what's going on visa wise, and you do want to start here, you can start here and then go later on to the United States, to Texas Tech or to any school in the United States, because these are U.S. degree requirements, and you will be able to get credit at a lot of different institutions. Especially, you should get full credit in any institution in Texas that's public, so UT or Texas A&M.
Yeah, I'm just remembering now when I was applying very many years ago to university, and I remember NYU had the campuses. I think they have like a Beijing campus, and they have the multiple Abu Dhabi campus. And I remember being like, oh, maybe I would, if I was going to go to Tisch, I might go to like a Beijing campus or something.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, like, maybe people, when they're applying from Colombia or whatever, another example, to go and come back, maybe they would have been like, oh, Costa Rica, yeah, why not? I'll take a semester in Costa Rica. That sounds fun. When you look at the university, so now, like, maybe speaking at education at large, because obviously I imagine that you speak with deans and stuff in Texas, and who are speaking about like what's happening. How much is the conversation about like what happened in the pandemic with students now? Like, how much change and shift did they see in attitudes and just capabilities, or is it back to normal, or are we still suffering a little bit of the consequences?
We're still suffering, and it's campuses all over. I talk to educators all over the world, and like I mentioned, I was finishing my doctorate, and my doctorate is in global education. So in my class, I had people from all over the world, and so we talked about that a lot, which was really interesting. And we've seen a real difference in students who, let's say they finished high school during the pandemic, or they were little kids and they were trying to learn to read. My son was trying to learn to read during the pandemic. And so how that really has impacted everyone who is in whatever stage of their learning cycle, and not typically for the better.
Right.
Yeah, it's made people weaker students. It also, people don't want to show up as much. I think you probably see that as well. We all got very comfortable sitting at home and doing things from home. And that's also students. And also people are less resilient. Also, maybe you spent a year online or 6 months online, or in some cases, had interrupted education for a couple of years. And then you have these potholes of knowledge. Very hard to move on from that, because you keep getting, for instance, in the public system, going back to that, you keep getting promoted because everybody's sort of they have the same deficits. So you're going along with this cohort, but you're not necessarily prepared. And so we see people who are graduating without the skills that they really need or the abilities that they should have acquired. And that's the danger that I see going forward.
Right. Yeah, like there's these gaps of knowledge which obviously don't get addressed.
Correct.
And I also have to imagine that there's, let's say you had a gap from 3rd to 4th grade or 6th or 7th grade. There's also like a specific time in your brain development and like your developmental abilities to like grasp critical reading or skills or whatever. And I think that even if you learn it after, you still had a gap in that time. So how do you even make up for that now? It seems very complicated.
I think it's really hard. I mean, I remember trying to teach my son to tie his shoe during the pandemic. And he was like a 5-year-old or something. And it's like, I didn't have the patience to teach my child that's the kind of stuff, yeah, sure, as a mom, I should be supportive and I should be able to do that. But that's also the kind of thing that they all see their peers being able to. This is a very small example. And then you learn because your 3 best friends are tying their shoes and they're not wearing Velcro anymore.
Right.
And so suddenly you realize that like those are life skills that you're not picking up.
I remember I don't remember who it was, but I do remember when a friend taught me to tie my shoe in school. There you go. It was like a very core memory, and he's like, you gotta do the bunny ears, and I was like paying attention, and I learned how to do it in school.
And imagine if a parent was like, no, you're not getting it right. It's like, we don't have the patience, you're gonna learn from a peer. So that peer-to-peer learning also was something, and also social skills.
That's the other thing I was going to say, because that's something that, Lauren's here now, but we joke a lot about. We make reels making fun, and then they're very self-deprecating humor. It's fine. But we talk about our office a lot, and it's like, well, now the Gen Z stare, which is like a TikTok trend, right? It's like you go into like a coffee shop or something, and they're just like looking at you, and you're like, hi, and they're like, hi, and like this gap in social skills. But as you get this, this constant churn of young people coming in, how much of that social skill gap is there? Because I mean, and also like on the job placement side, I can say that most of the job opportunities that I had early on in college, I just bullshitted my way through those.
Totally. But that's part of life, and that's what you're supposed to do.
It's just me like being charming and lying, basically.
It's okay.
And yeah, it worked. It was
It worked.
fine.
Look at where you are.
Yeah, it was fine. You know,
You're still bullshitting. Right?
exactly,
I mean,
literally.
And maybe I am too.
So I wonder, like, how much of not being able to learn how to do that is affecting students as they come into education, especially higher education.
Yeah, I mean, I see gaps. And so remember, I'm also on the employer side.
Right.
And so I see all of these young people who it's their first job or their second job, and they are not as prepared because they lived through all of this. And so the skill set is just different, I would say, to
Right.
put it in a polite way.
Right. Yeah, I think there's like a bigger hesitancy to like speak to people, like just coming up and I was joking with a friend the other day, when I was a kid, my parents would always say, when you walk into rooms, they hi to everybody.
Yep.
And now just getting said hello to is very weird. I encounter this a lot. Like, we go to conferences sometimes, and people will also just like smack through me instead of saying like "excuse me." I'm just like, what's going on, you know? Like, but I do wonder how, you know, I guess in universities there could be programs to kind of like help people develop that through like oratory skills and, you know, stuff like that.
There are. It's like and I always joke, a lot of what I do, both in the office and also if I'm teaching or in the hallways, I'm adulting. And I think that there's a real place for that. Again, the good old, as we said, soft skills or power skills, or just like, you know, I walk into an elevator and everybody's, you know, looking at their phone. I am too a lot. But it's like, hey, good morning. How are you guys? And I know they're like, ¿Qué pereza? ¿Quién es esa vieja? Like trying to talk to me. And it's like, no, I'm trying to get you to look up from your phone, and there is someone that you should say hello to, maybe, or each other, and interact.
Right.
Like, maybe I'm your next employer.
Right.
Maybe there's something that I see right there in the elevator by having a conversation. Here's an interesting thing. Someone just told me this story, and I didn't know this. There's a Tico who now is head of a foundation in the United States. And do you know how he got his job? He was at some kind of conference. He saw the head, you know what I'm talking about? He saw the head of this person who was disabled, and the person needed help getting it through some muddy field, and pushed this guy in a wheelchair. And because of that simple act of humanity, that person is now running a multi-million-dollar foundation and has incredible opportunities. Those are the types of skills that are in short supply right now, and that we all need to be more cognizant of. It's like just being gente.
Yeah. I have a funny story about something similar. I was in college, and well, first I had gotten myself into the situation, again, by bullshitting a little, but basically I was on a plane to New York and going back to school. The guy sitting next to me, I had my dog with me. It's like, oh, nice dog. I get to talking to him. He's like, what do you do? I was like, I'm a film director. I was a third year, you know, university person. And he's like, oh, my friend's in movies. And I was like, oh, cool. He's like, I'll give him your contact and get an email. So I was like, maybe 2 months later, I get an email, and I read Madison Avenue. And I'm like, okay, whatever. It's like, oh, well, John Caroli told me to, I'll bleep out the name, to meet up with you, whatever. And so I'll go to this office, and I go up. It's the Sony building, and I go to. I'm like, what? And so I go up to an office, and I'll never forget. It was like a tiny, super tiny office, and I open the door, and it's full of Oscars and Golden Globes, like literally being used as like paper, like, you know, like everywhere, like so many Oscars and so many Golden Globes. And it turns out that I was meeting with the CEO and president of Sony Classics.
Oh my God.
And he was like, I was just a kid, right? And so he was like, oh, like, I hear you're a Costa Rican director. And I was like, sure, absolutely. It turns out he was like converting a book into a movie, and I ended up writing that script. Didn't end up going anywhere, but it was like my first experience working with like a studio head, and I ended up having a good relationship with him. And then we were going to an industry meeting in Telluride, where there's a film festival there. And so we go there, and so I go to try and make this deal happen to make this movie. It would have been my first movie. And so there's a lot of networking events at these things, right? So I go into one of these networking events, and it was I was like 20, I was like 21 or 20. So I was really scared to like talk to people. So you see this super shy guy at the end of the room, and I just go over to him like, hey, hi, my name is Pietro. And he's like, hi, my name is so and so. We get to talking. He ends up being the head of ARRI, which is a camera brand in North America. And so 2 years later, more or less, my thesis is coming up. And so I remember that I had met this guy. I was like the only guy that he talked to that day. So I email Gary, and I'm like, hey, Gary, whatever, my name's Pietro. I'm shooting my thesis. Like, here's like, be my dream to shoot with an ARRI camera. We have good gear at school, but like this would be crazy. And he sends me back an email. It's like, send me what you need. And so I went to my DP who was helping me with the film. He's like, we have one chance to make this wish list happen. So we wrote this giant wish list of like crazy, like literally enough to like shoot any major motion picture. And he just replied, this much is the insurance. You have everything you need.
Oh my God.
And so we shot my thesis in Marfa, Texas. Right next to it.
Is Marfa cool? I've heard it's
Marfa's amazing.
I'm dying to go there. It's supposed to be a really cool place.
And there's 3 towns. Really, we shot it in Marathon, but there's Marathon, Alpine, and Marfa.
Okay.
And they're in the middle of nowhere, right?
Yeah, of course. Like, so is Lubbock, Texas. I specialize in the middle of nowhere.
It's like, I think it's like 8 hours from Austin by car, or you can fly into, there's like a regional airport there, but it's still like 4 hours from there. Okay. So we shot there, and we shot this beautiful film with like ARRI glass and ARRI cameras just because I talked to one guy in the right moment at the right time. That's how life works. It's interesting, right? Like how, university obviously prepared me to be able to handle that equipment and everything. But if it wasn't for the soft skills of going up to that guy, I would have probably never been able to do that.
And this is something that you and I were talking about earlier, and you alluded to this during our talk too. If you don't have people in your life who are going to teach you those skills, and you don't, let's say, have parents or mentors who are modeling that kind of behavior, how do you ever learn that? How do you learn to network and socialize and have a conversation? You have a disadvantage. So that goes to, what is the role of schools in preparing students to meet these future challenges? And so I would argue that maybe some of those teachers didn't even have people in their lives to model that behavior. So where are they going to get that from? So there are lots of areas for improvement, and we can only go up. However, we're all wringing our hands with this latest report, Estado de la Educación. But I would say, like, okay, like you said, like, we're not interested that much in the details because everybody's talking about that. And I'm actually interested in talking about the solutions. What can we do, especially from a private sector standpoint? What can we do to actually, tweak the system in these little places? Like I said, look at what's working and be able to amplify it. And I think teacher training is part of it. I think helping teachers learn to mentor and guide their students is a crucial thing that could be done, and it wouldn't be that difficult.
If I'm a student today, senior or junior in high school, and I'm looking to get the best odds for my future, what should I be thinking about? What should I be doing?
Networking. But again, if you don't have the charco in which to network, it's really difficult. You also, I think, need to understand and do research for, like, what are these skills that everyone is going to need? Like I said, these skills that are sort of non-negotiable for all of us, and you need to be trying to figure out how to get those. And a lot of them are available online. Honestly, they're not the skills and things you're picking up at school. A lot of it is going to be autodidactic. I really do think that.
And for what you're seeing in terms of like employability and placements and careers, like obviously, there's a big seat. Estudian lo que quieran. Yo estudié cine, but like
I studied political science and art history. Come on, I'm a 1 degree of difference from you there.
So what do you think, like, in terms of like Costa Rica, the current job market? What is best odds in terms of like, okay, I'm a high school student. I want to go. What majors should I be looking at, and what professions should I be really interested in?
First of all, you have to like what you're doing. That's number one. I always tell people, you better like what you're doing, because you may have to do it for a long time. And how awful to wake up every day and hate what you're doing. So that's number one. Number two, you do have to do research and understand where there's employability. Fortunately, in Costa Rica, we have so many available jobs right now, especially in STEM fields, but also in financial services fields. So I do think, and also even let's say that that's not interesting to you. You're a more creative person, but you still need to put food on the table. The tourism industry here is still another incredible opportunity. So we have a lot of things here that can make for wonderful careers, but you have to figure out what suits you the best. And so if you're going to work in hospitality, then you need to develop those soft skills. If you're going to work in finance and accounting or data analytics or cyber, then you're going to need really hard skills. So I think first is figure out who you are, what you like, what you're good at, and then look at where the opportunities are. I'm not saying, there's nothing I'm telling you is rocket science here, but it's just very basic advice I think that people are not giving or getting.
And if you're fresh into college, is your first year, what advice would you give a young college student to get the most out of his following 4 or 6 years, depending on,
Talk to your professors, avail yourself of the student services, talk to the administrators. When there are events on campus that bring people from outside or that bring business leaders, go and attend, be professional, ask questions. Every university, no matter how good or how bad it is, has a lot of opportunities. So take full advantage. Don't let life happen to you. Grab life and by the balls and do something. Because the opportunities, especially in a country like Costa Rica, they're here for the taking. They really are. This is not a place where there are not opportunities. With whatever you're good at, there is employability here. But you need the skills that will guide you to that right type of career opportunity. So you have to be self-directed. Again, life doesn't happen to you. You have to write your own story.
Right, have agency.
To have agency, absolutely. And if you can't figure that piece of it out, look for people who can help you figure it out. Find your right. And I've been talking a lot about mentors, but also you have to look for people who are going to help promote you. Great, I think Pietro's a great guy, and let me recommend him to you. So you have to look for those people who are going to do that on your behalf. Right. Sponsors, I would call them.
Right, life sponsors.
Yeah, there's a difference between, not AA sponsors. There's a difference between mentorship and sponsorship. And I prefer to be a sponsor for people, and that is to cultivate them and say, now let me help you spread your wings. Instead of oh, you're doing a really good job. Let me help you feel good about yourself. No, let me help you push yourself off the deep end.
Right. Yeah, I think that's super important. There's this quote that I love that's you don't, if you're a true friend, you're talking the best you can about your friends in every room that you can. And I think that's so important. I think that I do that so much. It's I'm always I don't know, if you say that you need glasses, I'll be oh, I know a guy that has a totally. Glass making thing, maybe, and I don't know how many of those has ever materialized into anything, but I would like to imagine that they're doing something for somebody somewhere.
I like that. And I always say I like to be a connector. It's sort of the same kind of thing. And that's the old Malcolm Gladwell idea. That I like to be a connector. It's yes, you needed somebody who you're planning a party and you need kegs. Oh, I have just the right person who's going to give you, a great discount on kegs. And you call your friend. Here's a great opportunity to start selling kegs to whatever company. And this is a foot in the door. So, don't make an ass out of yourself. Do a really good job. So it's that is a really powerful thing, to be a connector. And if you're a connector, it's going to come back to you tenfold.
And finally, because I think you probably have a good suggestion, are there any books that you think a young college student going into school or podcasts now that, or programs or something that you would be hey, if you don't have a good reference as this is a good book or a good podcast, or what are you listening to or looking at these days?
That's the Ezra Klein question on his podcast. And I would say that I think the Ezra Klein podcast is always an incredible thing to listen to, whether you agree or disagree. He has really controversial guests, and I think that you can pick up a lot. I also like, and this isn't necessarily a specific recommendation, but I also try to read and listen to news from all different points of view. It's really important to me to listen to Fox News, to read the Wall Street Journal, to look at CNN and BBC in terms of different sources, and The Guardian, because I think that you have to be well-rounded and you have to be able to talk to people from, different sides of the conversation, and you don't have to agree, but you have to be able to have a conversation. And in terms of a book that I may recommend to someone right now, Never Goes Out of Style. And this is a sophomoric book, but I would say that I would read and reread The Great Gatsby. Why? Because everybody feels misunderstood. We all feel misunderstood, and it's age old. And you're not misunderstood. You have to realize that, like I said, everyone feels that way, and for you to know that we're all out there and we're all struggling. And I think that there's some comfort in that, because life is not for the faint of heart. And to feel like others have walked in your shoes before you, again, very sophomoric example, and there are much better examples than that, but to know that that we all have struggles in this really complicated world, you have to find comfort in that too.
That to me is that's like my Catcher in the Rye. Like sort of similar. Like I think I overly identify with Holden Caulfield, which I think is a little problematic. But but it's always like that, like this weird kid who runs out of the house.
Yeah, Holden Caulfield, Great Gatsby. You don't really fit. None of us ever really fits, and so you're always worried about impressing the other, and it's like, you know what? You never are really going to be. You're always going to be from West Egg or East Egg. And it doesn't really matter where you're from. You've got to make your own way. So those are sort of those classics that never go out of style and make you feel understood sometimes.
I'll reread The Great Gatsby. It's a short read, so it's good.
It is, and also I would echo Catcher in the Rye, both of them.
The Catcher in the Rye is like my guilty pleasure, but yeah.
Mine is Hola.